So, hi everybody, thanks for joining me. I hope you guys are doing well and you read the Treaty of Versailles and you read kind of all the key articles that go with that because we're going to be reviewing that right now. So, I want to start this by looking at what happens with the Treaty of Versailles, what goes wrong. So, first of all, keep in mind we got Georges Clemenceau, or the Lorax, kind of takes control of the negotiations. He becomes the dominant voice. Maybe you saw that in the Treaty of Versailles. The map of Europe is going to be redrawn considerably, and Germany will be heavily punished for its role in the war. And this is really Clemenceau's idea, right? He's French, and he wants to see Germany get punished. He doesn't want Germany to ever beat France in a war ever again. He's so mad about the result of the Franco-Prussian War. He fights to get Alsace-Lorraine handed back to France. He pushes for a huge debt on Germany, etc. Wilson will not get what he wants. But the question remains, right? Is the war really Germany's fault? If we think back, right, Germany got involved in imperialism in large part because, they felt like they didn't really get a fair shake in Europe. And the war kind of was a chain reaction that started with, of all people, Austria and Serbia. So how does Germany get the blame for the war, right? A lot of cartoons from the period, especially in America and in Germany, were very, very critical of the Treaty of Versailles. For example, this cartoon on the left shows all of these big four at Versailles, and they're all holding up this huge spoon with this big pill on it that says peace terms. They're forcing Germany to swallow this bitter pill that is the peace terms. Over here on the right is a really creepy German comic called Der Propheten einer neuen Welt, meaning the prophets of the new world. And it shows, of all people, this is actually Clemenceau on the left. I know he looks like some sort of strange guy. And then that's Wilson on the right. And they are holding these stone tablets that are supposed to look like the Ten Commandments, but they're the 14 points. And in the background, you can see all these crying, screaming Germans. And so the idea of what that comic's trying to do is almost portray Wilson and Clemenceau as these evil, satanic, false prophets who are coming in with their vision for a new world. And they're kind of juxtaposing that with the idea of them rewriting the Word of God. So here's the map. The map changes are pretty substantial. We go from what I like to call easy Europe to hard mode Europe, right? On the left, right, we have the map of Europe that I think we've all come accustomed to. It's pretty simple and straightforward. We have big Germany, Austria-Hungary, and just a few Balkan countries. On the right, we get a much more complicated map. Right? We can see that Austria and Hungary split up. The territory of Czechoslovakia is added in. And that is also something that broke away from Austria-Hungary. Yugoslavia breaks apart. Yugoslavia is a huge victory for Serbia. You'll notice that Serbia isn't even on the map. What happens is that a huge part of Austria-Hungary breaks off, and then Serbia takes control of it. And so Yugoslavia is basically this Serbian-run Slavic regime. Romania wins a lot of territory, and we also see Poland finally gets a country. And the little Baltic nations are created by Germany. So we got Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And you'll notice that Germany's actually split up. The position of Poland actually reduces the size of Germany and actually kind of cuts East Germany from the rest of Germany, which is going to be kind of awkward for Germany. That's going to become an issue later on. You'll also notice that the Ottoman Empire is gone now, and there's this new country called Turkey. So take a look at what happened to Germany in particular. Let me actually adjust so you can kind of see. My face is going to move over here for a second. There you go. So take a look at this map. What you can see on here is that a lot of territory is lost, right? There's a little bit of territory lost to Denmark. There is Alsace-Lorraine lost to France. The Saarland, an area with lots of coal and iron reserves, will be independently kind of occupied by France, Britain, and America, and Germany. A little portion will go away to Belgium. Huge chunks of Germany are given away to Poland. A tiny little bit's given away to Czechoslovakia. And this area, the city of Gdansk, will become a free city. Or sorry, not Gdansk, sorry, Danzig. Are they the same place? They might be the same place. One might be the German name, one might be the Polish name. So what we end up getting is a Germany that's shrunk and weaker, right? It's lost land, it's lost natural resources, it's lost unity. The Ottoman Empire has it even worse. The Ottoman Empire, I'm going to move my thing back now. The Ottoman Empire is totally reformatted, right? It splits apart from being most of the Middle East and Arabia as we know it to becoming Turkey. Saudi Arabia wins its independence. All the Arabian countries actually win their independence. Then what happens though in the Levant or the Middle East, whatever you want to call it, the Palestine region, the Syria region, the Mesopotamia region, is you get these brand new countries that are essentially colonies. Now they're not really colonies, they're mandates. And what that means is that they have a mandate to eventually earn their independence. The problem is that independence won't happen for a while. In fact, a lot of these places like Syria, Iraq, Palestine, Lebanon, they won't get their full independence until after World War II. So for the meanwhile, they're essentially British and French colonies. So we have French colonies in Syria and Lebanon, and we have these kind of British mandate colonies in Palestine, Jordan, Iraq, and Kuwait. So let's look at how Germany was punished. Germany was punished pretty heavily, right? We can see that one of the first ways they were punished is they were required to take blame for the war. Germany and Austria both were, through Article 231, perhaps the most infamous article of the Treaty of Versailles. Germany was also required to pay a massive amount of reparations to the Allied countries, $39 billion. Yikes. The reparation amount was never really set in the treaty. It ended up coming out later. And that only increased more disputes about how much Germany should pay. One of the requirements that is clear in the treaty is Germany has to shrink its military down to 10 divisions. I don't know if you guys know how many troops are in a division, but it's about 10,000 troops. That means Germany's army can't really get much more than 100,000 people. Thinking at the kind of heyday of the war, Germany had an army of several million people, and France as well. I mean, this is a fraction of the military that it had before. I mean, this is a military that would have a hard time going toe-to-toe with the Netherlands at this point. Also, it loses big chunks of territory to France and Poland. Oh, sorry, I said 39 billion. It's 55 million. But back then, if we kind of do a little bit of inflation adjustment, 55 million is several billion dollars in today's money. So Germany will suffer from severe inflation in its attempts to pay off its fine of $55 million, which is pretty nuts. If we look at the amount of inflation they have, it's actually one of the worst cases of hyperinflation in human history. Look at the chart on the right. The chart on the right is actually in a logarithmic scale because you can't actually linearly measure German inflation during 1923. A mark or like a dollar in Germany goes from being worth $1 in January to being worth about $1 quadrillion by November 1923. In fact, money becomes so useless that there's this great picture, right, of these children playing with stacks of $1 bills. Because what else are you going to do with it? It's literally useless. That's how crazy inflation was. Oh, there's people in the hall, so that's fun. There's also some breakup in a lot of these older empires. Like Austria-Hungary gets broken up into a bunch of different states. We talked about that. Germany and Russia lose some territory. New states appear like Finland, Latvia, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia. And the Ottoman Empire splits apart, which we already talked about. The final thing to discuss is what happens with this League of Nations. Now, the League of Nations is the one element of Wilson's 14 points that does get a lot of support and will really come about through the Treaty of Versailles. Now, the good news about the League of Nations is that it does promote disarmament, it does promote collective security, and it does attempt to resolve future disputes through negotiation and diplomacy. The downside about the League of Nations is that it's relatively weak on its ability to enforce, right? It doesn't have its own dedicated military the same way the UN does. It also, much like the UN, depended on mutual agreement. The difference is the UN at least has 5 key counselors that when they all agree, they can get something done. The League of Nations really needed almost unanimous agreement to achieve anything. For that reason, the League is mostly an advisory council that just kind of throws words around. So here's all the League members in 1920. The dark blue countries are countries that are direct League members. Light blue countries are colonies whose mother country is part of the League, so they're effectively part of it. And orange countries are mandates that were once owned by the Central Powers and have been given away to the Allies. So much of the world is not part of the League. Big one that's missing is America and Russia. By 1928, huge swaths of South America go fascist and will leave the League of Nations. By 1943, even core members of Europe leave the League of Nations, including Spain, Germany, Italy, and even Japan. So is this a great peace? Perhaps not. Ferdinand Foch, in the summer of 1919, had one of the most prescient statements, perhaps, in human history. He says, "This is not a peace, it is an armistice for 20 years." He made this statement in, I want to say, late July or early August 1919. In almost 20 years to the dot, it's about 20 years and 1 month, World War II breaks out. This peace treaty, even at the time, was seen as something that could sow the seeds of future war, which we can kind of see over here in this cartoon, right? We have Uncle Sam, and they're the leading member of the League of Nations. And here they are sowing the seeds of future wars. So that's it. That's all I wanted to review and go over to kind of make clear why the Treaty of Versailles is kind of broken, why the Treaty of Versailles does not really solve all of Europe's problems, and it's sort of this disappointing and frustrating end to a very disappointing and frustrating war. Tomorrow, we'll talk about imperialism. When you come in tomorrow, I will not be there. There'll be a sub, and there'll be a journal entry. You can see it right here. It's Did the Great War Strengthen Imperialism or Weaken It? And then you guys are going to get some documents on imperialism. You guys are going to get one of 3 different kinds of documents. I'm going to move my little picture again. You'll either get one about what's going on in Africa and how there's fighting going on in southern Africa. You can see this. There's like German forces in Togo, etc. You'll learn about Indian troops who serve on the side of the Allies fighting for the British. And you'll learn about Arab troops who actually were revolting against the Ottoman Empire. And that's why, by the way, they were able to win their independence when those Mediterranean states did not. So they actually sided with the Allies to help rebel against their imperial rulers, the Ottomans. You guys might read about that. What you're going to do in class, other than read and take notes, is share out with each other. So you're going to basically have a handout that has this chart on it. And I want you to think about how does each of these 3 places matter to the war effort. You're going to talk about how and why were troops from these regions used, India, Africa, and territories of the Ottoman Empire. What these regions had as their kind of goals of participating in the war, what impact the war had on the region, and what impact the region had on the war, or the people from that country had on the war. So the difference between like the 3rd and 4th box, maybe the 3rd box is like, what effect did World War I have for India, Africa, or the Ottomans, versus what effect did India have on the war effort, Africa on the war effort, Ottoman Empire on the war effort. Okay? So then, final couple of conclusion questions you'll need to answer. To what extent did the colonial peoples help the war effort? Did they contribute? Or to what extent did World War I help the colonial peoples? And you might see a little contrast here. All right? You might notice that maybe, perhaps, they're contributing more to the war effort than they're getting in return. Then, we'll talk about Friday when we get there. All right? I will see you guys on Monday. Thanks for tuning in. And shoot me an email if you have any questions, if you have any concerns about what happens tomorrow. You guys are going to pretty much be working and reading in small groups the entire hour. All right? See you guys.